verify, and would they poll, or would they just say, nope, that's not the way the Quran's meant to be interpreted, you're wrong, thanks, play again?
Yeah, so it depends on the scenario. So yeah, like they'll actually have like a legal process and scholars to look into it, because everything's a case-by-case scenario. It's not so black and white as it may seem to be.
And I'm sure that, yeah.
No, wait. Okay, stop. Because you're mistaking some other stuff. First of all, it also depends on the country. But right now, unfortunately, majority of Muslim countries would either kill you or imprison you for even questioning the Quran. So you gotta keep that in mind.
This is the theory of it too.
But the New Age. No, the New Age. This is why I love this guy named Imam Tawhidi. Like a little personal story. I almost left Islam because I'm like, whoa, this religion is way too bad. I was converted to Christianity or Hinduism. I was literally considering that, and it's because I'm like, what's going on? Why is my religion? Because look, back in 2016 and 2017, there was literally a new terrorist attack every week in Europe. Every week, there was not even an exception. Every week there was a new terrorist. I was like, what the hell's going on? Why is my religion so like this? And then there is I put up this guy named Imam Tawhidi, which I recommend everybody to see him. This guy gets death threats from leftists and from radical Muslims all the time. Like, he's managed to himself the left, which is hilarious because he's actually the most like peace-loving person, and the best way to describe it would be he's an Islamic reformist. He's a legit Muslim cleric. I think he was born in Iraq. He lives in Australia, and he is legit a Muslim, like a Muslim version of priest.
I thought he was Iranian, or is he Iranian?
It could be. I think his I don't know, his parents could... No. He went to the school. He went to the school in Qom.
I promise you, he's born in Qom.
Then,
my argument...
Okay, well, double check that.
I've always said I respect religious freedom, and even as a Christian, if I don't agree with Islam, some of its tenets, I do agree that the Islamic tradition is still part of the Judeo-Christian tradition. We still believe in the same God. We just don't necessarily believe about the significance of Jesus and who Jesus was or whatever. My argument would be that if any change is going to happen within Islam, it needs to come from within. We can't force Islam to change. It has to come from within.
Exactly.
My argument is the Western world provided a model of liberty, and with that liberty does come some downsides, and some of the arguments that Islam makes are correct. Like the argument that women should cover themselves because it tempts men to walk after them. I do agree with that. Now, do I think that women should have to wear a hijab? No,
Wait, just so you know, I'm live streaming this. So everybody, this guy just live said Islam is right about women. Just keep that in mind. Go ahead.
Well, that's right. About women in the sense that women dressing provocatively does incite men to lust after them. Now,
no, it is true. There's psychological studies proving this. Yeah, that's true.
So my point is that it's like the argument I hear from feminists in schools say, well, I shouldn't care. If you were distracted because my boobs are out, that's a problem. Okay, so if I were to walk around with my dick out and it made you uncomfortable, would I say that that's a you problem also? Or would that not simply be that I'm a sexist and I'm a predator? So you can't have it both ways. It's either A, your body can make me uncomfortable because you don't want to see it, and your body can make me uncomfortable because it causes me to desire to do things with you I cannot do. Right? Those are still parts of the same point.
Also, you'll basically treat her a bit nicer than you would if she wasn't attractive. For not even the merit of like she's a good student or she's a good worker, but because she has a very beautiful body.
Right. I think the argument don't women in the Western world to do the job. They're becoming fire culture. But I also don't think that women should parade around half naked while it's.
Well, okay, wait. Here's the thing. Wait. Okay, you again. There's a difference between beliefs and legal rights. Because I certainly hope you're not saying the government should legislate clothing laws. Because again, at the end of it is there. But if you're right, for institutions like the school system, yeah, I get it. The clothing rules there make sense. Except for the hats, that's different.
A manner of dress to some. I think that the government has a right to say I can't walk around naked. I can't display myself in a way that is obscenely lewd or overly revealing. But I don't think the government should say, for example, so if a woman wants to walk around with her face or her hair uncovered, that's one thing. If a woman wants to walk around with her vagina or the nipples uncovered, that's another thing. Right? I do believe the government has a right to censor nudity in terms of the way that we're allowed to, because basically the way that you dress is freedom of expression, which is still an outgrowth of freedom of speech. So I would say that the government has a right in the public square right? There are laws against obscenity. There's a reason why on primetime television, you're not allowed to say the F word and other certain words, and on the radio, they can censor speech in the public domain because it might expose children to like the F word or lewd language. But as long as you're not violating certain parameters that don't infringe upon children and undeveloped minds, that's a different argument. So I would agree that yes, Islam has a point about women should be modest, the same that Christianity does. Islam just takes a more authoritarian view of enforcing the standard of dress that women should be held to than Christianity does.
Ooh, okay. Again, I would strongly disagree with legislation. I do agree with you on the recommendation, but not the legislation. Also, wait, tell you one time, Sonny, can you go on YouTube? Are other able? Do you hear other people on the YouTube or no?
Yo, can you last a while? Because I'm just playing 2K right now. Can someone else do it, please?
Yo, hold on.
Okay,
So, Alex,
let me double check.
You know that your mic's been on in COD this whole time.
There's a limit to
Yeah.
everything.
What's like Ace? I hear you, but I'm saying I'm live streaming this on YouTube, and I want to make sure Apollyon is able to be heard.
My question is, would you make the argument you disagree if you agree with the recommendation but not with legislation in terms of dress? You would say, I think the government should recommend that I, for example, don't walk into, say, an elementary school or a park naked, but if I choose to walk into a park naked, that the government has no right to take any legal action against people walking into a room full of children naked?
No. Well, this is the thing. The public schools that are publicly funded by taxpayers, yeah, that I would strongly say, yeah, they should legislate it. In fact, they should be very harsh on anybody who, walks around naked in primary schools and stuff.
What about the sidewalks that are paid for by the public as well? They're funded on the public dollars.
See, this is where it gets complicated. Again, there are radius laws where, like, if it's a 5 kilometer, or in Americans, 5 freedom miles from the school, apparently, like, if you're in a radius of that, you're not allowed. And I think that's a fair law. Again, so if it's 5, so even includes the sidewalk.
So as long as I am not within, say, 5 miles of a school, I should be able to walk naked in with children with my penis on full display. As long as I'm not too close to a school. If I step 1 foot outside the radius of a school zone, I should be able to pull my penis out in front of a child, and the government now is powerless to stop.
No. Wait. We're mixing up penis out versus slutty because those are two different arguments. I'm saying your penis should only be out in the comfort of your own home, and whatever institution that you and the consenting group of adults agreed to meet upon. But outside of there.
My argument right now is not an argument in and of itself. What I'm trying to define first is the scope upon which the government would have any right whatsoever to legislate your manner of dress. So we agree that there is an acceptable limit to which the government can legislate your manner of dress then. Are we agreed upon that? Or do you agree that the government has absolutely zero right to legislate your manner of dress? That's the first thing. We have to establish the what's called a limiting principle. Right, because
But what is the boundary too? Like, what should you never cross, and what could be, could do with the?
No. This is very simple. Again, anything that's privately owned. So if it's your home, your farm, your business, you should be allowed to dress whatever you want there. But yes, anything that is publicly owned, I agreed that the government could say, okay, there is a minimum clothing requirement. But I strongly. What?
Agree that a private sex club, right, or a nudist club or whatever, you have the right, for example, by law, to say that you can be naked in this establishment. I would agree with that.
Of course.
However, that's reasonable. But then that same word, now that the government outright says, fine, you are a nudist club. Anybody who's in there can be naked. However, even though this is your own private property, your own private business, you still cannot be naked in a nudist club with a minor there.
This is where it gets very fascinating. That's why we have a guy on the server who is a extremist capitalist. So I'm curious what he thinks about this, and obviously I strongly support capitalism, but I do believe there should be a minor.
I am a capitalist, but I'm not an anarcho-capitalist, because if you are an anarcho-capitalist,
You're a moron.
You essentially just get a might makes right argument, and then we get Skynet, where a private corporation owns everything rather than the government. You essentially get a communist government, a parallel government, corporation that has all of the same powers in terms of government. They just basically, the government just stands aside and says, as long as it happens in the private sector, you can do whatever you want, and then what inevitably happens is everything public becomes part of the private sector because some private corporation owns it, and now there is no public sector.
Oh, 100%. Wait, no, first of all, this guy is not an anarcho-capitalist, but the main thing is, this is where I would say I would lean more towards libertarianism than capitalism. And I know they're not opposites, but they're not 100% the same either. And this is where I would actually go with the libertarians, because right now this is why I got into a huge argument with the extremist capitalist guy on the whole idea of free speech.
Yeah.
And he brought up some very fair points, which is the government shouldn't force people, shouldn't force Twitter to have free speech. You know what I mean? If Twitter's a private company. And then...
I disagree with that.
No, I know, I disagree with it too. I disagree with you, but actually, hear this out, because he made some very smart points. Let me tell you. This guy was also very anti the 1964 Civil Rights Bill, and he's black. So this was like extra fascinating for me.
Is he a Malcolm X kind of guy?
No, he absolutely despises Malcolm X. But let me tell you why. He said the 1964 crime bill was actually, because the 1964 crime bill is much bigger than people, it has much more legislation and laws that people realize. Because people think, oh, this crime bill is just, it just says black people are equal, oh, we're done. No, it's actually not like that. There were certain laws in America at the time where the government literally forced businesses not to hire non-whites, okay? So the government literally was legislating, hey, you're not allowed to hire black people. Okay, so it wasn't like the businesses were choosing not to hire black people. No. The government was forcing them not to hire black people. And not only that, there was also laws on, interracial marriage was illegal. There was also laws on so many things that, whites did. So he said, obviously, the first part, he strongly disagrees with. The government should not tell you who you can or can't hire based on the color of your skin.
I would agree with that, because essentially when you are setting a limit on who the government can hire, what you're essentially doing is you are setting a limitation on what contracts people are allowed to engage in, right? That's essentially saying, if I were to tell you, oh, because of the color of your skin, you can't buy Coke products. Well, that's like, you can't do that. That's to bar somebody on the basis of freely choosing to seek a service or engage in a contract or a mutual agreement or whatever, be it verbal or written, on the basis of skin color. I would think that's stupid and illogical. You're cutting out your own market share by doing. I'm going to make more money if I'm allowed to do business with everybody. That's the whole concept of free markets.
Exactly. Now here's the second part, though.
What was your favor of big tech being able to censor people, though? I want to hear what. Did he really articulate what his rationale behind that was?
Oh, I can actually have him talk to you later. He's one of the most famous people we have on the server. He has the most subscribed TikTok libertarian TikTok channel, even though he literally says he's. They have. Don't mention his name yet, Sonny. But yes, they probably have.
Oh, TikTok's a prior, TikTok, Twitter, whatever's a business, it should be able to, censor whoever it wants. My argument against this is that you have two types of business model in terms of like editorial and speech platforms, as you would think, speech mediums. And so, in terms of media, you have what is called a public platform, which is essentially like a forum or any kind of thread, discussion-based thread, wherein the website is not held responsible for the opinions or whatever of the people who publish on their site. Then you have a private editorial, with which it carries. They each have their own taxation laws and laws that govern them, right? So essentially, if I am an independent publisher because I purposely screen the opinions of those, I am saying that I discriminate of what opinions are allowed to be, published under my service. That means that I accept culpability for the opinions of the people who publish under my, like a newspaper, right? That means that I am subject, if I publish something that is libelous, my editorial platform, my newspaper or whatever, can be held accountable for that speech. I am taking culpability for that speech because I am basically saying either this is an opinion that we have vetted and we have said that even if we don't agree with it, we agree that this opinion should have a right to be published, and you allow it to be published. Basically, a private editorial publisher has the right to exclude somebody, right? If I write into a newspaper and give my opinion in an op-ed, they have the right to choose not to publish that opinion, right? They have a right to say, even if, so that's the difference. Whereas Facebook does not proclaim themselves to be a private editorial venue, they claim themselves to be a public media platform, which essentially is the same as me going into the street and speaking my opinion.
Wait, 1 sec. But Facebook is not publicly funded, though. There's never been any public funding for. There's no taxpayer funding for this.
But here's the thing: by definition, something that is considered public fare is something that is non-rivalrous and non-exclusive. So it means that there is, right? Like, for example, you could make the argument the sidewalk is non-rivalrous and it is non-exclusive. Now, in terms of the proliferation of social media, if the argument was, like when people used to say, oh, if you don't like Facebook, go make your own Facebook. Well, they tried that with Parler, and then what happened? All the big tech companies collectively used their power to shut down the servers and to do everything. So, like, for example, Google Marketplace, they took off the marketplace. Same thing with Apple Store. And then Amazon shut down the servers that Parler was running. So basically, that constitutes a violation of antitrust law because you are ganging up on the competition in a way that becomes rival and exclusive, when this is supposed to be something that is basically what you've done is between the three companies, you have created a monopoly on the internet, right? And so you're still engaging in antitrust violations because there is a rule in antitrust law that says I cannot buy up businesses that constitute competing interests or a periphery interest. So Google having a monopoly in terms of the internet because they have a search engine, they control what pops up.
Yes.
And also Alphabet, which is the parent company for Google, creates the search engine, the operating system for Android. And then on top of that, so basically they have a monopoly on the internet between Apple, between Google, and basically Amazon. Between those three companies, they have an absolute monopoly on the internet and who's allowed to present their ideas on the internet. And even if you put your ideas on the internet in some way, they can just say, well, we're not going to let your websites crawl on our systems. So anybody who doesn't already know them will never stumble upon them. Oh, and anytime you try to actually post about them, like, so for example, if you post on Facebook about like MeWe, Facebook just basically automatically blocks it as spam.
Yes, wait. Okay, now you're going off topic. No, I understand what you're saying. But
So
listen to the 1964 crime bill argument though, because the main issue is it is a fact that if you force a private company, to have free speech, that is technically a government intervention in the economy. Now, obviously, that's not completely the same as socialism or fascism, obviously. You'd be crazy to say, oh yeah, we're forcing Facebook to have free speech. Oh, we're totally fascist. Obviously, no, that's a ridiculous claim by any idiot to make. However, it definitely isn't fully capitalist either. And this is where at least the kid is consistent. Because this is a black kid who literally says, like, he doesn't, for example, he hates affirmative action, where companies, are, like, they can't say, oh, you know what, we don't hire blacks here. Like, they're not allowed to say that. Now, here's the thing, though. This is where it gets interesting, because I think, first of all, the kid has a more optimistic view of America than I do, which is fascinating, because people usually call me, like, a America fanboy in the server. Because, here's the thing. If there was no affirmative action from the 60s, and there was nothing that said, hey, you can't, so there was nothing that says, you can't fire someone just because of race. Because in the past, it used to be completely legal. You could fire someone, you know what, we don't like faggots, get out. Oh shit, I should have said that on YouTube. We don't like N-words, so, whatever. So this is where he stays consistent, at least. He's like, you know what, if a company says they don't want to hire black people like him, that they should have a right to do so. And if the company says they don't want to hire gay people, they should have a right to do so. I personally actually would disagree with that. I don't think a company should have the right to fire someone based on race.
I agree, because I would say that the basis here is an objective basis, right? I don't think so. If subjectively, I believe that white workers are better than black workers, there might not be an objective basis for that, because every individual is different. You have to judge every individual based on their objective behavior.
Amen.
Right?
Amen. Yeah.
So I would argue that again, it's the same thing as like the standard by which the left use to say man and woman is completely subjective. It's based on one's own interpretation. I don't believe in that. I believe in I understand that there are some things, there are levels of strata in logic where some things are objective, some things are subjective based on your subjective interpretation of the fork in the road, A or B. Then you get to another objective truth, and then you have to subjectively, like I can say murder, right? Murder is an objective fact. Now, subjectively, was this murder justified or not? Well, that might be a question that's left up to the individual, right? So Derek Chauvin's actions regarding George Floyd. Objectively, George Floyd ended up dead, right? And Derek Chauvin's actions contributed in some part to that death. But that's a different question. So I think the majority of our argument needs to be based on objective facts, and then we inform our opinions about what those facts mean subjectively. You cannot
Obviously.
subjectively so if I was going to say I am a white person, well, that is objective. And then to say subjectively, I think that white people are or are not racist, or there are some cultural assumptions that may be associated with white people. But to say, well, I don't consider you white. Okay, well, what's your objective basis for doing so? Why would you say I'm not white? Right? There has to be first. You have to start with something that is a truth, right? A fact. And as I think most philosophers we can never completely know an absolute truth, but we can approximate truth as closely as possible.
Yes.
So if you have to start with those fundamental axioms, the things that cannot be basically disproven, they exist in the state that they are, and the only way you can get away from that reality is by disregarding an aspect of reality, one of the fundamental laws of physics or something, the law of identity, cause and effect, etc. You'd have to discard some basic fundamental axiom of reality in order to get away from that truth. I would say that if you can't do that, if you can't get away from the truth by disregarding one of those axioms, okay, well, that's objective, so then you go from there. And then your opinion about, like, so you could say, marinara sauce, one of the main ingredients is tomatoes. Well, that's a fact. There's no debate about what a tomato actually is, what constitutes a tomato, what can be...
Wait. Whoa. To play devil's advocate, technically some people say you can make marinara sauce without tomato, because who are you to say what is the recipe for marinara sauce?
I would say that the Italian culture that came up with the recipe and defines what goes into marinara sauce, they would be the ones, since they're the ones who invented it. If I create a light bulb, if I'm the inventor of it, it's my intellectual property, even if that intellectual property has become kind of a folklore, kind of widespread cultural norm. I would still say so marinara sauce is the intellectual property of Italian culture, and therefore I would say it's up to the cultural norms of Italians to say what goes into marinara sauce. I would say that if you are a Moroccan that makes a sauce very similar to marinara, but it doesn't...
Okay. Anyway, I don't want you to go on a rant on marinara sauce. But listen, overall though, this kid is not a bad kid. Obviously, I struggle to disagree with him on this, and I know you do too. But right now, first of all, is anybody on YouTube right now? Is it listenable?
Yes. Yes, you can hear both people talking.
Wait, you did? Who checked it?
I told you earlier, but I guess.
Oh, I didn't hear you. Okay, no, thank you so much. That's perfect. Are you talking to me on COD right now, or are you talking to me on thing?
Discord.
You're talking on Discord?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. But okay, either way, though, one thing is Apollyon, whatever your name is. You're gonna love this kid because he's actually is objectively proving that the South was actually socialist. There was actually some quote from Southern what's called Confederates, and he was proving that the Republicans were capitalists. So he found some really cool stuff. So the kid is, again, he's not.
I've made arguments before. I think you've heard me make the argument. I believe that essentially the social structure of a feudalist monarchy economically was not any different from a communist structure in real principles, right? I would say monarchies are actually not right-wing, despite how hard, just like fascism is not right-wing, I would say both monarchies and fascism are left-wing. And the left has tried a sleight of hand to place both of those ideological systems on the right, when I disagree with you.
Wait. No. I would say economically, yes, they are left-wing. But I would actually make the argument that fascism, economically, I agree. Fascism is left-wing, feudal monarchies are left-wing, 100%. But in terms of culturally, I would actually say that nationalism is right-wing and globalism is left-wing. You know what I mean? Because
I would somewhat disagree with that, because I would say that
Hello?
I don't believe nationalism is in and of itself right or left wing. I would say that nationalism is equality, loving one's country and believing one's country should be the best. I would say that essentially, though, the border where you get into colonialism is when, and imperialism is essentially where your nationalism extends to the belief that every country on earth should be part of your country, whereas that's left-wing nationalism, and I would say right-wing nationalism is basically my country is an isolationist form of nationalism. You essentially draw your borders and you don't try to expand your borders. That would be the only difference to me. I would say that right-wing nationalism would be isolationist nationalism, and left-wing nationalism would be globalist, expansionist, kind of imperialist nationalism.
Well, okay, see, this is where it gets weird, because, look at Marxist quote, which was, workers of the world unite, no border, no nation, fuck your deportation. You know what I mean? They believed in a borderless, stateless place. Right. Well, nationalism would never believe in a borderless world. Nationalism would just believe, we should conquer most of the world and we should let the inferior people, again, not all nationalists, because there's a very, very big difference between European nationalism, like any country in Europe, versus American nationalism. Because, again, American nationalism is not based on race or religion. It is based on ideas. You're making a huge mistake. You're making a huge mistake if you believe, a Muslim nationalist is the same as an American nationalist. Because a Muslim nationalist has way, way different beliefs.
Well, you can make the argument North Korea is nationalist. You can make the argument that the Soviet Union was nationalist. You can make the argument that also, if those are left-wing ideologies, you can make the argument that both fascist Italy and Nazi Germany were also nationalist, but then you could also make a compelling argument that both Nazi Germany and fascist Italy were in fact left-wing.
Well, no, like I said, economically they are left-wing. That's pretty much given. But here's the thing. North Korea, I agree, North Korea is nationalist, but no, the Soviet Union was not nationalist. If you actually look at their thing, they had, in their emblems and stuff, they had multiple flags, multiple languages. They did not believe in one nation. They literally believe, the world should be united under communism. They were globalists. They weren't nationalists.
Would you make the argument that even though that the Soviet Union itself, would you say that the Russians under the Soviet Union still referred to Russia as Mother Russia, or do they refer to it as Mother Earth?
Ah, that's where it gets interesting, because only the Russians, right now, literally, I have a friend who is in Canada, and he literally came from Russia six months ago. So he's a really interesting guy, and he told me right now, anyone that's an extreme nationalist in Russia goes to prison really fast. Putin is very anti those extreme nationalists, and I would bet they would not call it Mother Russia back in the day. Maybe some of the Russian nationalists, majority of the Soviet Union, would probably say just motherland. They would not say Mother Russia.
Maybe you could make the argument for the Soviet Union. Maybe make the argument that Russia itself, being a more wealthy country than say, let's say Czechoslovakia, you could make the argument that Russians would have the privilege of having a more patriotic or nationalist slant, whereas the people in Czechoslovakia or Yugoslavia maybe wouldn't necessarily have the same sense of nationalist pride, and so they would rather unite under the idea of the USSR as a whole. That's kind of a subtle, nuanced argument. I guess I could see sides, and I don't necessarily say I could conclusively say one thing or the other there. I am inclined to believe that nationalism on the right is still more isolationist, and like you said, more like American nationalism. I would actually say American civic nationalism and what Donald Trump was trying to do and things like that are right wing, and I would say more the globalist thing, even what North Korea tries to do and China tries to do is still nationalistic, but it's more of a left wing nationalism because it seeks to impose your will on everyone else and kind of bring them under an imperialist rule.
Well, see, okay,
So-
this is why I don't like the term right wing and left wing. This is why at the server we have the 8 values test and the best compass test, because those look at multiple aspects and they don't just randomly put you as a right wing or left wing. Because of things like this, American nationalism is not the same as any European or Asian or African country nationalism. There's
I
none.
make it's like this is the thing about the whole left and right wing, right? If I stand here, right, if I'm driving in my car, if I make a left-hand turn and then I make another left-hand turn, and then I make another left-hand turn, and then I make another left-hand turn, at some point I start facing right. So I make the argument that with all political ideologies, if you go farther enough on the spectrum, you circle back around and you end up on the other side. It's just like if I travel far enough west, you end up on the east side of the earth, right? It's kind of
Whoa. Wait, you believe the earth is round? What the fuck?
yeah, right.
I thought you were smart, bro. What the hell? This whole time I was like, oh, this guy seems pretty smart. Oh my god, you're a round earther? You're one of those crazy round earthers. No, I'm kidding. Have you heard of horseshoe theory?
I'm also a Christian, so I believe there's a magic man in the clouds that keeps moral score and watches all of our actions. We're under constant surveillance, and if we make plays that the magic referee in the sky doesn't like, he marks as a point against us on our scorecard. So you can make the argument. I believe in some things that you might think are illogical.
Yeah, no, those are ridiculous. The Earth was obviously just made out of nowhere. It was nobody made. Now, okay, listen. Have you heard of horseshoe theory or not? Have you heard of horseshoe theory?
Ball. There's clearly that existed for no reason. It's always existed. You can no point of origin. And then just randomly, suddenly, it just decided to explode. And in process of the chaotic nature of an explosion, somehow everything arranged itself in a fairly orderly fashion. It maintains internal homeostasis. I believe that is much more reasonable to believe that everything random that always existed just suddenly decided to randomly do itself in orderly fashion. Then there was somebody controlling the design, right? Like
dude, I get it. Listen, I get it. Just do you know horseshoe theory or not?
I heard the term. I can't say that I'm familiar with the tenets of it or the premise.
Okay, the horseshoe theory is literally exactly what you said, where the political extremes, whether you go extreme on the far right or the far left, you end up to the like a horseshoe. If you follow a horseshoe like a path. And I strongly agree with that. The super far right and the super far left have a lot more in common, even though they hate each other.
So yeah, I tell this to people is that essentially, if you look at the argument of protectionism, is a good way. If you look at it, people on the center left and people on the far left love protectionist economies. People in the center right really hate them. They're more in favor of free markets. And then people, when you get further right, again, that nationalist leaning, they tend to engage in some form of protectionism, right?
Yep.
I would not want a completely protectionist economy, but I am in favor of protectionism in the sense that we should safeguard American industries. I do believe the free market is a good thing. I do believe that we should try to lower the cost of consumer goods. But I also don't believe that I believe that we should not lower, for example, if we could lower the price of all steel products in the United States by completely abolishing the U.S. steel industry and then just giving complete control of the steel industry to China, even if that would reduce consumer goods at price point, I do not believe that would be inherently good for America as a whole, because then all China has to do is say, well, we're not going to give you any more steel. We're going to put a complete embargo on steel, and now America's fucked. So I believe that in the national interest, I am more in favor of autarky than I am in favor of mutual cooperation in the globalist free market. Right? I believe that if every country...
Okay, you should definitely get PPP. I want to see your results then.
Well, I would say if every country is capable of sustaining itself in terms of energy, right, and so then if every country is capable of sustaining itself in terms of energy in certain industries, we still then compete, because while you may be fully capable of sustaining yourself, and so am I might still have a piece of technology that makes my cost of independence cheaper than yours. So I can still sell you my technology that would maximize your energy efficiency, and in doing so, even though you were already energy independent, it would still create competition because we're all independent, right? But I still make more money than you do because I'm more efficient in terms of my independence. So then there's still a competing market for ideas and technologies that increase efficiency, even if we are all energy independent. even if we're all economically and agriculturally.
Yeah, the thing is, yeah, you are placing a lot of importance on the competition aspect of it, which, I mean, I do agree. That's one of the things that makes capitalism the best, is because, yeah, everybody is forced to compete for your money. That's good. But when it comes to like things like human rights violations, that's the only price I would say that we, like, for example, we shouldn't. I'm not saying let's go have a war with every country that has a dictator. Like, no, it's not the West's job to be the world police. Okay, they should.
If a government is pressing you, it is your job to overthrow your government. It's not my job.
Right. No, I get that. But here's the thing, though. I do actually would agree, and maybe you'll disagree with me on this. Would some sort of like sanction on them, like not that we will go to war with them, but maybe we trade less with them and trade more with our allies and more neutral countries, just so they stop doing that.
Yeah, if I'm the richest guy in town and you want to do business with me because you know it'll be profitable for you, I have a right to say, you think you're a bad person and I don't agree with your morals or your ethics, and therefore I'm going to withhold my business from you. That's within my right to do.
Yep.
I believe in the moral standard of the people that I associate with. If I think that you're rich, but I think you're an absolute crook and a dirtbag, I have a right to say, you and I am rich. You want to do business with me, wants to do a merger. I think I don't want my name and my reputation associated with him in terms of business. Yes, that's my right to do.
Yeah.
I can set a moral standard for the people I associate with. Freedom of association is a First Amendment right.
Yeah. No, exactly. It is. Amen. Anyway, listen. I really enjoyed talking to you. I'm surprised that you don't have your PPP in the server. I literally, of all people, I expected you to have it.
I've done all the tests, I believe. I have the screenshot somewhere.
Yeah, well, as long as you uploaded it, we can double check and see if you've done it. Either way, right now, I was trying this new format of literally having a live talk with a bunch of people on the Discord server while I was playing Call of Duty Mobile. Although to be, but I think no, I don't play Destiny. But this conversation was mainly dominated by the two of us. So yeah, next time. I guess people were so fascinated because
my wife. Anyway, so I'm gonna have to step out here in a second. But
your wife's what?
Yeah. Did you see my debate in the chat? It was like talking to a wall. So I was like, you know what? You don't know how logic. I tried talking to Silent about the party switch.
Oh, dude, no, the kid is crazy, man. Like, you shouldn't really waste your time on him. I think he's like 16 or I don't know. Honestly,
I made that.
No,
did you actually read the premise of the debate?
No, I haven't read the whole thing yet. But here's the thing, though. Like, look, Ace is 14 years old, and Ace is way more mature than that 16-year-old kid. Like, it. So I don't even like to use the age argument, but because
Ace is pretty funny.
Well, I mean, he's no, he's not. But anyway, I'm kidding.
My argument essentially with the party switch, because we got into this. I said that the party switch never happened, right? The party switch would say that the values of parties had inverted. And I would say that that's false. The values of the Republican Party has always been a Judeo-Christian morality party that believes that in the preservation of individual rights on the premise that every human being is created in the image of God and is therefore entitled to equal protection in the law. And I made the argument the Democratic Party is still... That believes society should be a certain way, and that these certain powerful elitist groups should be able to force everybody else to conform to their ideal model of society. I fail to see how that's any different now. Southern states that voted Democrat in the
Enter your cut off to the group, please. I just came back from meeting.
Oh no, I'm stopping the Call of Duty because I'm stopping the live stream right now. But
I have to get off Scholar because my tablet's dying. I'll charge it up and get back on later.
You're fine though. The main point is, I totally what's it called, agree with you that the party switch didn't happen. And the funny thing is his argument though, because here's the thing, there's a few good arguments you could make. Like you could say, they were both super patriotic. I'm like, okay, sure, but the funny thing, he didn't even go anything with that. He literally went with location. Like, oh yeah, the South voted for this, therefore it is. I'm like, okay, by that logic, then whoever Germany votes for is always they're the same people that voted for Nazi Germany. That's literally then the same logic. It's like, oh yeah, the location is so stupid.
I said the same people in the South under the Civil War are not the same people of today because those people are dead. He's like, well, they're still white Christian Southerners. I said, right, but white Christian Southerners are the same. That's identity politics. The individuals voted to uphold slavery in this war are long dead, and there are new individuals that inhabit the same geographical territory. That is not the same thing. Just because I live just because I live in Utah, I don't automatically think the same as every other Utah.
Well,
You know what the funny thing is? Like, he didn't even know that the Republican Party was started in Texas, in the South. Like, he's on the South. They were started by 120 blacks, like 20 white.
Right, it's stupid.
Stupid.
The kid doesn't know how to logic, and like, it's just dumb shit. Like, I'm like, okay, wait, so if you're saying, it's like their values have not switched. The Republican Party is still a Judeo-Christian morality party because even if you are a Republican, even if you are not a Christian, your morality is still Judeo-Christian moral values to the greater degree. Right? Most Republicans, even if they're atheists, tend to believe that abortion is still murder. They still tend to believe that socialism and communism are theft. Right? They still tend to believe in private property ownership and the right to defend your private property. Most atheists on the right still believe in the individual right to own a gun, etc., etc. Whereas your average leftist believes you as an individual shouldn't have a right to own a gun because if we let everybody own a gun, some people might do something stupid with it, so we should punish the majority for the mistakes of the minority. We believe that society should be a certain way, and if you disagree with us, it doesn't matter, we're just going to steamroll you because we are more better than you.
but you get it,